We were super hungry. That's an ingredient that if you have that, if you're hungry, you can do anything in the world you want to do. But you got to be hungry. We studied everything that happened. Every meeting that we were in on the way home, we were like, is there anything I said I shouldn't have said? Did I offend anybody on how I talked with them? You know, it's a people business. And everything is people business. And everything is the culture that you develop all around you.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Culture Camp. I have a super exciting one, and I'm very, very honored to have this guy on my my podcast. I've known him literally my entire life, and just been very, very special for me. I've been wanting to have this one of my goals to get him on my podcast. So welcome, serial entrepreneur, multi-business owner, world-renowned speaker, Randy Haugen, my father.
Thank you.
Yeah,
happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks. Means a lot to have you on here. A lot of people ask me where I get all my beliefs from and the culture and all this stuff, and really it's just been from you. So thank you for everything you've ever done for me, and you've given me a lot of opportunity, and just you're the best dad I could ever imagine.
Well, thank you. You've taken everything you can. You've been a sponge. You've learned everything that you can learn, and you've been hungry. That's a key.
Yeah, I've definitely been hungry. So I want to get right into it. I mean, you've had, how many different businesses do you think you've owned?
Oh, 20 something.
And some of them have been huge. Some of them have been staples in our community as far as, you know, some of the restaurants and, you know, Costa Vida and Johnny Carino's and stuff like that. I mean, you've been a huge part, especially in our city of Ogden, Utah. You've built a lot of those buildings in South Ogden, and I mean, you're a very big part of all of that. So, you know, I want to get into it when, you know, you started an entrepreneur or kind of owning your own business really young.
Very young. I think I was 19 or 20. The first business I actually owned, where I had a building and inventory and stuff like that.
And what business was that?
National Speed Equipment in Ogden, Utah.
And growing up, Grandpa was great, but you grew up in Roy, and nothing against that, but like, Grandpa was just kind of a white collar worker. He worked on base. We found out when he passed away that he's very decorated military service member. So appreciate his service and everybody else out there. But was he the one? Is he ever motivating you to become an entrepreneur or showing you how to do that?
You know, my dad, he came from a background where he was the most successful kid of any of the family. Even though he ended up, you know, he worked at Hill Air Force Base for much of his life, you know. And my dad and mom always encouraged me to do anything I wanted to do. They always encouraged me that I could do anything in the world that I wanted to do. And I didn't know that everybody didn't have that, you know, so it had a lot to do with them and how they raised me and just how they treated me and so on, although that they were not ever in business for themselves. And I wish they would have been, but, you know, it is what it is.
Right. And that's interesting, though, because, you know, I guess you base a lot of your success and a lot of the principles that you learn at an early age of, you know, due to, you know, your parents, my grandma and grandpa, but you have other siblings. Like, what do you think was different about you that why you kind of broke through the proverbial mold and became who you were versus other people? Not talking about my aunt and uncle, but, you know, because I get asked this a lot, and there are other people that are, you know, so I'm interested, you know, your perspective of why you were able to punch through that.
You know, that's a good question because, you know, I grew up in Roy, not that Roy's a bad place, but it's a very low level thinking town. Let me put it that way. You know, there's not a lot of people that we grew up with that, you know, talked about entrepreneurship and succeeding and everything else. But the only thing I can boil it down to is very early on when I owned National Speed Equipment, we went around the world, you know, drag racing. So we had a pro stock car and a truck and all that. And
that was in the NHRA, right?
Yeah, NHRA. And we sponsored about 20 cars out of the Ogden area from Top Fuel all the way down.
Wow.
But we'd be at races, and I see people that have a lot of money sitting there, spare engines, big trailers, you know, and all that stuff. So the question came up, what would I have to do? How could I get to the point where I could have an income and not have a job? So I could never escape that. So I got hungry trying to figure out how to do that. And I think that was the difference between me and my brother and my sister is somehow I got to the point where I believed I could do anything in the world. I just have to outwork everybody.
Right.
You know.
Which is definitely your personality. I mean, you work probably you're the hardest working person I've ever seen in my entire life, which you definitely taught that to me. And I feel like I'm a pretty hardworking guy, but I'm just trying to keep up with you. When you were through your entrepreneurial journey and, when you first started out, was it a lot harder than you thought? Or I know a lot of these stories, but I want other people to hear them. I mean, you went through a lot of situations and I'm closing that store from a situation that's going on. Like, you kind of tell me about that.
National Speed.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a partner and, I don't want to say anything bad about him. This isn't about him, but he owned a fire extinguisher company that he had inherited from his grandmother and grandpa. And he just wasn't, his personality, he wasn't ready for business. And he pretty much destroyed it. And I was so young, I didn't understand my strengths and his strengths. And so I ran the store. I was there every day for 365 straight days, including Christmas. And he got to the point he just stopped in, take money out of the till to pay fire extinguisher bills.
Wow.
And finally, after about a year and a half of it, I just had enough. So it was all my inventory. It was all my money that was an inventory sitting in the building. And one day I just went down there. I said, I'm not doing this no more. Walked out the door, took the key, slid it back underneath the door. And that was it. Called
Really?
Richard, said, I'm done.
Really?
Yeah.
What did mom think about that? She probably, most spouses might, what the heck are you doing?
Oh, this was prior to mom.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I met mom shortly thereafter.
Okay.
Or maybe
so-
right about at the end of it. Yeah.
Okay.
Somewhere right in there.
What plans did you have? Did you have any plans after that? Like, okay, I'm gonna, close the door and move on to this, or was it just like, hey, I'll close it and figure it out later?
No, I just closed the door. I didn't know what I was going to do, and I wanted to take some time to think about it. I knew that I was capable of doing just about anything, but when you grow up and you don't know anybody that's ever made any money, that's got a kind of impact on your life.
Right.
And if you don't have access to any money, and you got to start from scratch and, go down the road, you got to go a long ways before you scrape enough money together to do anything. And that was kind of where I was.
Right. So what happened after that? What did you do after that?
We didn't do anything. Mom was around then because I remember we spent a couple weeks together and I was just thinking, what am I going to do? And I had a guy who was we were building the 24th Street steel bridge, the Viaduct in Ogden.
Right.
And a friend of mine that was younger than me was in charge of the entire project because he was so good.
Wow.
And he called me up and he said, I need you to come down here and work for me and be a welder's fitter, go put stuff together and tack it together and weld it. So I did that for a while. And during the process of doing that, I was just trying to think, what can I do for a living? How can I make $100,000 a year and not have to have a job? Back in that, that was a lot of money back then.
Right. So when, where did you go after? Because I know I'm trying to think about after tell me about Peterson, because really, like, Peterson, when you worked for the marine company and motor company, that's when you really started to, like, I guess things maybe started to click and like you used to put things together. And I know, like, a lot of your stories from, I guess, me growing up, and we still bring them up today. You still bring them up today about that whole situation and all the things you learned from that. So I guess you were building the bridge. And then, I don't know what happened after that. I know you've had a million different jobs, from building bomb pallets to being a dishwasher, and, you've had all these things. How did you get in, or why did you go to work for a dealership? And it's kind of funny because it's come full circle because now we're in dealerships. But, why? How? Tell me about, I guess, the beginning parts of Peterson, because that I feel like that's laid a lot of the base of where you're at today.
Yeah, that was where I started meeting people that were successful. But how that happened was we had a friend that was a partner on the race car with us. His name was Lynn. And Lynn went to work for Peterson Marine, which was a boat store, and it was small at the time. And they said, we need a parts department. Do you know anybody that could come in here and put a parts department together for us? And Lynn says, I know a guy that can do it. I just don't know if he will. And I was the guy. So they contacted me, and I went down. They told me, we want you to develop a parts department. You got to make it stand on its own. It's got to be profitable. It's almost going to be like your own business within the business. So you've got to make it work.
Right.
And so I did it. And I did that for a few years, and we really did well. We moved into a giant dealership in another city. It was big, probably the biggest dealership in the state, physically. And then they had a Peterson Motor Company. They had a car dealership, and
Right.
it was pretty bad goofed up in the parts department. And so they called me up and says, "We want you to come over here and fix this." and so that's how that happened. And I went over there, and they hired me, and I went and worked there.
You exploded the parts department.
Yeah, we did.
What were some of the numbers that you were doing, and when you got it, and how you fixed it, and when you left?
When we walked in there, that would have been 1980, January 1st, 1980. When I walked in there, they were doing total volume. Of course, this is old numbers, but their total volume was 37 grand a month, and they had way too many people. They had like 10 people to do that much volume.
That's a lot.
And so I went in there. It was a disaster. And at the end of I thought they wanted me to fix it like in the first 2 weeks,
Right.
And so it was such a disaster. At the end of the first day, I went back in. I said, "There isn't anybody that can fix this. It's a disaster. You need somebody better than me." And they said, no, just take your time, do it. And
Right.
so anyway, I started down the road doing it, and learned how it worked. I'd never been in a car dealership before. Learned how it worked, and we took it from $37,000 a month to about between $250,000 and $300,000 a month. We went from an $18,000 a month loss. That's how much it was losing.
Wow.
To about a $35,000 a month profit.
Wow.
And I could have took it to $1 million. I easily could have took it to $1 million a month.
Really?
I mean, I figured out the combination on how to do it and what to do. And really the bottom line is we treated people. We had a wholesale business where we sent body parts all over the state.
Right.
And we developed a system where we could deliver parts in Salt Lake, which was 35 miles away, quicker than a dealership next door to the parts department could get them.
Really?
So we developed a system. We did that. We put guys on the phone that developed relationships with all the people in the body shops, so they felt comfortable when they'd call, and these guys got to know them. And we just took over. And I could have took it to $1 million really easy.
Wow.
Yeah.
So Amway. I guess everybody's heard of Amway, but and everybody's heard of you because of Amway. I mean, you're arguably one of the largest distributors in Amway ever. I mean, you're one of the staples in Amway's heritage and history, and you're the largest company in the world as far as the network marketing. Why did you choose network marketing? It was a very different business back then. I mean, it looks nothing like it does today.
No.
But why did you choose network marketing when you maybe could have had a career path in the dealership business?
Well, I was at the time that Amway showed up, and I went to a meeting, Mom and I, but at the time that happened, the owners of the dealership were talking to me about owning a dealership together. And so I could have done that.
Right.
So we were headed that way. And they would have, financially, and they would have had the ties to all the car manufacturers. I mean, it would have been a chance of a lifetime,
Right.
And in the middle of it, we went to this Amway meeting, and they started talking about some of the guys that were the biggest in the world and what their lifestyle was like, and how much money they made, and all that. And so I kept saying, "So what's the hard part?" And I went 5 times.
Right.
I went to 5 meetings while I'm trying to figure out if these guys are full of it, or if they're real, or what is it? What do you got to do? And so anyway, I finally came to the conclusion that if they can do, they had a book that had like 50 people's stories in it that was successful.
Right.
And so I looked at them all, and they were from all different walks of life. And I said, what part of this is so hard I can't learn it?
Right.
And so we got involved, and the whole thing was to make $100,000 a year and not have a job, and be free and have some freedom and be able to do some things. And a couple things that happened. We had the biggest guy in the world who had like 95% of all their volume under him. We ended up befriending him, and we spent a ton of time with him, picking his brain, learning how to do it, and all that. So that's how it started.
And that was Dexter?
Yeah, that was Dexter.
So why do you think so when did you get into Amway? 1982?
Yep.
When was Amway founded?
59.
So you were in it 23 years. Wait, my math right? Yeah, 23 years after it started.
Yeah.
So it's funny because everybody was like, "Oh yeah, if I was done on the ground floor," I'm like, "Well, it was 23 years old." I always say 20 years, but it's 20 years old when you got in. I mean, like there's, like I don't know. People are funny when they say, "Oh yeah, like Randy was in since the beginning." I'm like, "Well, he would have been 6 years old if he was in from the beginning." Why do you think you were able to succeed in that? Like, what started the explosion when all of a sudden, was it just like a burning desire of a dream? Was it the right mentors, the right situations? I mean, you guys were on freaking fire. I mean, one of the fastest people, you're just crushing it. And, for many years, for 25 years, like what propelled that success?
We were super hungry, and that's an ingredient that if you have that, if you're hungry, you can do anything in the world you want to do, but you got to be hungry. We learned from we studied everything that happened. Every meeting that we were in on the way home, we were like, is there anything I said I shouldn't have said? Did I offend anybody on how I talked with them? It's a people business, and everything is people business, and everything is the culture that you develop all around you. And so as we were learning that, we did everything in our power to create the right culture so leaders could thrive in our system.
Right.
And they did.
And what was so special about that culture? What were some things that you did that create that?
We innovated, and we made a lot of the tools and innovated a lot of techniques and strategies on how to develop it. And we also learned how to teach people how to do it. And it had never been done before. Nobody had ever comprehensively been able to teach people exactly how to do it and what to do.
Right.
And so we innovated a lot of it. We were just super hungry. We were always trying to figure out how to get it better, how to be smarter about it, and how to develop leaders. Because most people never spent any time developing leaders. All they did was just keep doing the same thing over and over and over again.
Right.
And all your leaders are different. So you got to get people to do everything in their power they can do on their own, and then you fill in for whatever weaknesses they got and help them strengthen the weaknesses somewhat, but really help them utilize the strengths that they have.
Right.
And so we had pretty much a strategy laid out on how to make it happen. I mean, I could look you in the eye and say, if you'll do what I tell you to do, and you're hungry, and I'll teach you how to do all this, I guarantee you can make $1 million a year. And it was true in that period of time, because we had everything. We had everything we needed to make it happen and get it done and all that. And it was an amazing journey, but a lot of it had to do with, we learned from the very best guys in the world, but we just didn't repeat exactly what they did. We thought about everything they did. We thought through it. They've been doing this now for 10 years. Is it still what we should be doing?
Right.
We just really thought a lot. We spent a lot of time analyzing things, thinking things through, and we did it. We never sat around. We worked our tails off. This probably scare everybody, but for the first 17 years, we never wasted 10 minutes in a day.
Oh, I know. Our first family vacation that didn't have to do with business was my 9th grade year. We went on a cruise. You remember that?
Yeah.
That was our first. I mean, we went on some 4-wheeler trips, like maybe some camping trips, but like our first, like maybe like real vacation, I guess you can. I mean, not really a real vacation, but like a vacation like that didn't have to do with anything with business, was when I was in 9th grade on a cruise.
I remember it specifically.
Yeah, I mean, I do too. I remember this is the weirdest thing in the world, because there wasn't 500 people there that we had to entertain or shake hands and be like, smile and act all happy all the time. I mean, it was surreal, but it was cool to watch you. I wish I was a little bit older that I could have watched all of that stuff. It would have been cool to see you guys in action. Like if I could go back and be like a fly on the wall or like to oversee everything, like that would be awesome. You talk a lot about and I think is a very good for a lot of people in any business they do, is a system-based business versus a superstar-based business.
Yep.
And you guys really systemized everything. I mean, everything was, I mean, plug and play, right? Like people can call it like a true franchise model, whatever you want to call it. It's a system-based business versus just a superstar. Can you explain, get into detail about that? Because I think it's really important for anybody. Like if you have an ice cream shop or a clothing store or an online business or in-network marketing or like even whatever, I think it's very important to know this.
A superstar-based business, the more that we did, the more credit we got, and the more sort of famous we became in that circle.
Right.
And that could have gone to our heads real easy. Like, look what we did, we, I, me. But the more that you push that away from you and put it on other people, and don't take the credit for making that happen and push it away and put it down on other people, the better off you are. Because if you have a system, the more of a superstar that you are, the harder it is for anybody to ever think they can duplicate what you do.
Right.
And so the more strategic and systemized that it is, and you don't take all the credit, and you're not the superstar, you're just orchestrating everything and making it all work, the more they think they can do it. So production-wise, people will way more outproduce anybody else, any superstar-based anything, if it's a systematic thing and they can learn how the system works. At McDonald's.
Right.
McDonald's, they got, high school kids working in the most successful restaurant in town,
right.
McDonald's, and because everything's systematic.
Just plug and play.
Yeah, plug and play. Here's how you do this, cook for this long, do that. And so that's what we developed. And we laid it out fairly clearly in teaching audios that end up going around the world, but we laid it out pretty clearly.
I think it's so important for people, because if you want, like, you can only do so much. Like if you want all the the credibility and the notability and all that stuff, like your business is only kind of based on you. Like that's why most public speakers, I guess, probably the Tony Robbins and, even the Ed Milet's and like all these people in any industry, they public speak a lot, but they have books because the books out there are selling, making them money while they're not there. I mean, they have, coaching deals and podcast deals and, all kinds of stuff, because if they just base their life off of public speaking, they can only be in so many cities at once, which is one, and they can only do so much, right? with a quality of life. Like, obviously you could be on the road 365 days a year, but I don't think anybody wants to do that. But if you get stuff working for you and compounding, then you're truly systemizing yourself, where you can be in many places where maybe you're doing a podcast and it's getting 1 million downloads a month. So 1 million people are hearing you, which is therefore probably growing your public speaking, and it just compounds. But some people just want everything to be based on them. They don't really think about how truly to systemize processes.
You're making progress when the thing operates without you having to be there. Anytime you're superstar based, you got to be there because you make everything happen.
Right.
So you're better off to, like, systematically, I mentioned that we had audios that went into, 20 something countries around the world. I ran into people, this sounds totally bizarre, but to the point of what you're making, I ran into people. I was in Hawaii one time, and I ran into, I don't know, I'm going to say 20 people that had succeeded at an incredible high level in India. They were from India because they'd gotten a hold of all of our audios.
Really?
Yeah, and they just systematically did exactly what was on all the audios, and there was like 20 of them that were successful enough they won a free trip to Hawaii.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I remember talking to this guy. I won't name his name, but I do think he listens to the podcast. He'll know who I'm talking about. But he tells a story about him going to India. And this is probably 10, 15 years ago, I think. About 10, 15 years ago, maybe 14 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago. I don't know. It wasn't that long ago. And he remember landing there, driving hours and hours and hours to the middle of nowhere, miserable, buggy, just having the worst time of his life. And he was in a network marketing company setting some places up in India. And he remembers calling his wife that night, wanting to go home, and just miserable. And he had like 2 weeks or maybe 3 weeks left on the trip because he just got there. And then he hopped in a cab, and that cab driver was listening to a Randy Haugen CD. And he's like, it clicked to me that I was supposed to be there. And then he finished his trip and came home. Like, and he actually just told me that story like 6 months ago, maybe.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's crazy how, like powerful that is. And it even makes me think kind of giddy, like just feels crazy that your guys is with that. Cause I was younger, so I didn't really get to see all that influence. And, I'm seeing now, like, when I go check my ticket sometimes at a Delta kiosk, they'll look at me and be like, "Are you Valerie Haugen's son?" And I'm like, yeah. What? Bye. But it's really cool because it means a lot to me that, leaving an impact and a legacy, a true legacy, with people. And you guys did this without internet, without phones. I mean, without a GPS. I mean, I remember mobbing around in the bus with the freaking road atlas and moms with binoculars trying to figure out what exit we had to go on. And I remember the road atlas was literally marked with like a pen maybe of the road that we usually took because we took the same route so much. How do you think, because like, you built a culture that was unbelievable and so like for capitalism, for freedom, like people like were not dying for it, but like they were like living for this culture. How were you able to create that with no phones, no cell phones, none of that? Basically, like you said earlier, is a magazine that was printed periodically, and that's basically was your social media.
I think the answer to that is that, first of all, we were way blessed in all of this. So if I sound like I'm trying to take credit for any of this, I don't.
Oh, you deserve to have a lot of credit.
I don't mean to sound like that, but I think that we had the ability to inspire people, to get them to believe that they could do anything in the world that they wanted to. And that would be what we did with people. We would take people. There was nothing better than to watch somebody walk across the stage somewhere and, making a couple $100,000 a year and get an award, and remember that the first time you met them, they had nothing.
Right.
And that whole process it's amazing, but we inspired people. We helped people do more than they ever could have done without meeting us. Let me put it that way.
And this was in the hard times when you actually had to physically show up to the events. I mean, you had like tapes, but you guys would run about 30,000 people every first Saturday of every single month around the country. I mean, and that's how they learned. I mean, you couldn't go to a podcast. You couldn't go to a YouTube channel. I mean, you literally physically had to go pay the money for a ticket, go into an arena, listen to these guys for a weekend, and then bounce back every, and it's just like, I recently was talking to someone about what you guys did. And we started talking, and I'm like, I have no idea how you did it with no cell phone. I mean, you had the briefcase, the bricks, like, but really no technology, And you guys were insanely successful. And it's just kind of freaking bizarre. I mean, I don't know how you, like, I have no, like, I don't, like, with the company now, like, I have no idea how we would do that. Like, I was talking to a guy, we was just at RBDA this last week, and I'm like, I don't know how you guys did it with no, social media, no, and he's been in the business for 40 years. And I'm like, that just seems crazy to me. But, it's kind of, it brings up a good point of like people adapt. And if you don't leave yourself an out, you have to do it. Obviously, like, you didn't have a crutch, so you just had to do what you had to do, and you only know what you know. And you also had a great mentor. How important is it to have a mentor, and how important was that situation for you, that you had somebody you can rely on?
It's critical, because if you rely on yourself to do everything through trial and error and teach yourself, I mean, today there's a lot of avenues to get information, but you're not going to live long enough to get it.
Right.
If you don't have a good mentor that you can say, should I do it this way or should I do it that way, that can give you some knowledge from experience, you're not going to live long enough to make all the mistakes that you got to make to learn everything you can learn. So a mentor's, man, if you can get your hands on a mentor, that's critical.
Right. No, I 100% agree. Talking about teams, I mean, you built, how many people do you think were in your group?
A couple 100,000. I
mean, this is a long time ago. What do you think was the most impactful thing that you did to your team or for your team as a quote unquote leader?
We did so many different things. We had couples leaderships where we would have 20 couples come. We'd isolate ourselves somewhere at a resort somewhere in the middle of nowhere, and we'd spend an entire weekend trying to teach them how to think. How the women should look at it, how the men should look at it, and if you're going to succeed, it's not going to be easy.
Right.
You're going to have to do things that ordinary people would not do because they don't want to be uncomfortable. And, I used to tell people, if you don't want to be average, look at what the average person does and don't do anything that resembles it.
Right.
But we would teach people over the course of a weekend. We would bring outside people in, like so many different celebrities that had credibility with people, and they would put credibility on us. And so we sort of build a culture that it was okay, and they were edifying of the people who had succeeded, and it was just, we did so many things,
Right. How would you define culture? Like, what is culture to you?
It's the way you do things and the way you treat people. It's what you teach people as an organization, how to act, what to do, the whole thing. Because people don't know, they just run amok. Most people have learned from their mom and dad and friends, and probably for the majority of them, those people didn't succeed very far.
Right.
So they ingrain bad habits, bad thoughts, low-level thinking, or whatever is ingrained in them. And you got to get them to go beyond that. You got to get them to a higher level. And if your culture brings people to a higher level, you treat people right. We always tried to do everything we could to treat people better than anywhere else they have been.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I definitely can know from firsthand experience of how you, you're very much more known for you as a person. I found out, everybody, around town, and a lot of people know who you are, and, dealing with a lot of business people here in the state of Utah, a lot of people know who you are. But you're really more well known for who you are than what you built, which I don't know if that's like, I think that's a good thing, because I think you'd rather leave a legacy for who you are than like, oh, just look at what I built. Look at me. I definitely think there needs to be credibility and, like, congratulations for everything you built. But like, how were you able to keep so like grounded and kind of in tune with people? Because like, I remember, going to all these events, and, everybody would come up to us and just want to, oddly enough, like, touching us sounds bad because that sounds like they're touching us, but like shake our hand and give us a hug and be like, oh, you're, the twins, and, you're Randy and Valerie's son, and blah, 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 all these things. But you guys were able to just be you, like, through all of that noise. I mean, I remember, like, we could go on and on and on about how crazy it was back in that era, for you guys being pretty much celebrity-like. I mean, it was hard to go to the grocery store. It was hard to go anywhere, commercial flights. It was hard to go anywhere. I mean, especially in where we lived. I mean, it was really hard to go anywhere.
Yeah.
And so, we kind of felt that start. Like, people on this podcast were thinking like, you sound like an idiot, but literally, like, I mean, you tell a story about we were in the freaking middle of nowhere and someone followed us there to just get an autograph on a tape. And like, it was kind of weird. How were you able to keep yourself so grounded and like eye on the prize and so in tune with people? Because you, Mom, cared a lot about people, and you would be the type of people that would sit there and talk to them for hours because they're talking about their aunts, uncles, brothers, daughter, sister, or whatever, and they have a broken leg, and you just sit there and be like, oh yeah, and talk to them. But that means a lot to people.
I think that somewhere along the line we got dedicated to trying to help people regardless of their situation or where they came from or whatever. And so we were pretty dedicated to that. But, in that book it was called The Profiles of Success. And in that book, where there was 50 different stories about people, I knew that some of those people weren't doing well anymore. So they had their day in the sun, but they weren't doing well anymore.
Right.
So I logged that in. And I remember we were early on when we were outgrowing everybody and, all this stuff. I remember we were speaking somewhere, North Carolina or somewhere, and we were back in the back with this couple who had made a lot of money, like millions and millions and millions of dollars. And we're having dinner with them, and Jim said to me, he said, "So how's it feel?" And I said, "What?" And he goes, "Well, you're the talk of the town. You know, you're on your white horse riding across the top of the mountain. You got everything under control. Everybody's begging you to come in and help them, and, you know, blah, 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 blah." And he says, "How's it feel?" And I said, "Well, Jim, ask me that in 10 years. Anybody can do it once. Ask me that in 10 years. Let's see how we react over the next 10 years.
Wow.
Because I think that if you're humble about it all, and you know that you didn't do it all, even though it takes you to be hungry and do it.
Right.
But if you're humble about it all, and you understand that there's a lot of things that make up all the ingredients for success, you can't claim it to all be you. You know, I think that if you're humble enough, you get blessed.
Right.
And I think that if you're not humble, you don't get blessed.
Right.
And so somehow through all of it, we always knew that there was a lot of things besides us that it took to make it happen.
Right.
And we never lost sight of it.
Well, I think you and mom talk a lot about that. You basically could see the end, right? Like you always talk about like, yeah, this is going to end. Like this is going to end one day. And you know, when it ends, then what? I mean, and I think that a lot of people get caught in that they never see the end.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard. Like, you know, when I was doing okay in network marketing, and then when I was, you know, with the dealerships now, it's like I have to like reset and be like, oh, I can, you know, do this or spend this much money because I'll get more. There will always be more and more and more and more and more. But, you know, the discipline says it can end. I mean, and your favorite saying is God owns everything, and he can, you're lucky to manage a little bit of it.
Yep.
And he can take it away at any moment. And I think that's very true. And I think people get caught up in that they never see the end because they feel like they're invincible. And it happens to like a lot of celebrities, happens to a lot of successful people, happens to a lot of people in your in groups, maybe in Amway, where
Yep.
they blew a lot of money, and now what are they doing? I mean, I try to find people like, because I remember, you know, this person back in the day, and look them up, and I can't find them, or like what's going on. And you guys have kept going nonstop and building like serious wealth instead of just being rich. But there's a difference between wealthy and rich. Like building that for the last, you know, 40 years
Mm-hmm.
or longer. You know, how like that's been huge. I mean, I know a lot of people don't do that.
Well, I'm more conservative than most because there was, you know, that there was a time early on when we split the National Speed, when I left National Speed, my partner ended up owning it, and we didn't notarize one sheet of paper. My attorneys messed up, and we didn't notarize a piece of paper. So that left us liable for everything they did for a period of about 9 months. And we ended up getting sued by, I was going to say 20 different suppliers.
Wow.
And they knew what happened. They knew the situation. And so some of them got judgments against us and said, if Richard ever quits paying, then we'll come after you. And he ended up paying it all off. It took years. We had to pay some of it, a little bit. And so we were broke. You know, we didn't have anything. We had low-paying jobs, and, you know, at that point, I'm like, we're never going to charge anything. If we can't pay cash for it, we don't need it. And we lived on a fraction of what we made, and we didn't make hardly anything. And it's just, money's hard to get.
Right.
You know, don't waste it. And almost everybody in the world will have a point in their life where their income shuts off.
Right.
And it might happen more than once. So you got to prepare for it. And I remember I think we were at an island in the British Virgin Islands, and there was a superstar back in the Amway business, some friends of ours, Kenny. I'll just say Kenny.
Yep. I know who he is.
And we were just so excited that we were on that island with him, or on the yacht, or whatever we were doing. I can't remember exactly where we were, and you know, Kenny made a lot of money. The year that I had this conversation with him, he made $12 million.
Which was back in the...
Yeah, so that's like $30 million today.
Right.
And I said to Kenny, I mean, we're new to this, and you know, the business was like 30 years old, 20 something years old at that point, and going strong. It hadn't been going strong. It crashed around 80. It took a big dip, and then Kenny and us, we sort of brought it back.
Right.
But I said to Kenny, Kenny, how do you know this is going to last? How long is it going to last? How long are we going to be able to do this? And he started laughing, and he was so smart. He had a lot of wisdom, and he said, it doesn't matter. I said, what? He goes, no, it doesn't matter. Build like it will never end, but plan on it ending tomorrow morning. And that was the best advice anybody ever gave me in my life. And I based everything we did going down the road on that.
Right. Which, you know, you guys had a lot of commercial real estate in 08. You know,
oh, yes, we did. $60 million worth.
60 million. I mean,
yeah.
It was great in 07, but you know, 08 hit, and I remember it was, I mean, I don't remember it being dicey, but I'm sure it was dicey. I mean, we have I don't know how much that building was in South Ogden, but it was a big building. And,
15 million back then.
And I mean, that had no tenants.
Well, we were building that building, and we had a construction note, and the bank that we had the construction note with went broke. And so us not understanding the game, we kept paying the payment, which was $72,000 a month with and we lost all of our tenants. We had letters of intent. They all disappeared because, 2008.
Right.
And we flipped about $200,000 a month from having a positive cash flow to a negative cash flow. I mean, and it all happened like in 90 days.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's not fun at all. But you guys, I mean, we went through it. I mean, we didn't lose anything. We still had a decent life, and we lived in the same house, and everything was great. But like, there's a lot of your friends, people that I know now, pretty much lost everything back in that, especially in commercial real estate and residential real estate, because you had a home building company, and you did a real estate company, you had a mortgage company, and commercial real estate. So pretty much the everything that could have gone wrong with your mortgage company, the real estate company, your commercial development company, your residential development company, and your construction company. Yeah. All of everything just kind of caved in. I mean, it just stopped. I mean, it was crazy.
And our partner, we had a partner on all that, and they had a huge income outside of all of this that you're talking about.
Right.
In fact, we had sold them these stores.
Right.
And so they had this huge income, and then we had a huge income outside of it, from Amway.
Right.
And so if we wouldn't have both had that, we didn't know if we were going to make it. We really didn't know if we were going to make it.
Really?
Oh no, it was. Yeah, we were ready to buy a casino in Reno, and
I remember that.
And so we didn't know if we were going to make it, and if we wouldn't have both had that income, neither one of us would have made it. Everything would have vaporized right before our eyes.
Really?
Yeah, we would have lost everything.
Yeah, I mean, because I guess you're minus $200,000 a month in cash flow. That's got to come from somewhere.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Yeah.
So if you're brand new and you're a manager, you're a leader, you're a business owner, you're whatever, what's the biggest thing, pieces of advice that you could give someone when they're leading a team or building a team, or how to treat people? Because this is Culture Camp. Like, my whole goal is to just really talk about team building. And you guys have just built such an amazing team, and still, like, I still get calls, texts, see people at events. Literally multiple times I've scanned my ticket at the Delta counter, and they look up at me and they're like, "Oh my gosh, like, your mom and dad affected my life this way and that way." Like, what's the biggest piece of advice that you could give someone on how to truly lead people and have a good culture in a company?
I think that you've got to, you got to help people all that you can by encouragement and teaching them. Sometimes being bold enough to confront them and say, "Look, you're really messing this up. This is pretty bad how you're doing this. And here's how you can do it better." You're better off to try to help people and teach people and move them in the right direction than just get rid of them, just fire them. And if you build a culture where you're lifting people up and you're helping them be better than they would have before they ever met you, that's really the win in it all.
Right.
You got to have a way that you're improving people's lives. I mean, that's sort of the bottom line.
Right.
And everybody matters. Another thing we have to understand is that everybody's got situations going on in their own life that we're not aware of.
Right. Oh, for sure.
And so when they have bad stuff happen to them, or they don't perform right one day or something like that, sometimes you got to give them the benefit of the doubt. My biggest weakness is I give people the benefit of the doubt longer than I should.
Right. Yeah. I could relate to that.
Yeah.
For sure.
But on the other hand, even with that being said, there's still times that you've got, people are in the wrong place, and you've got to make a decision that they can't be on your team anymore. So I'm not saying that you can't ever do that, but you just have to have a culture. You have to have a way where you're improving people's lives all the time.
Right. One thing I want to ask before we end this is, how have you and Mom been able to have such a great relationship through this and do everything together? Like, I don't know if I've ever seen you guys ever argue or fight or anything ever that I can really think of. Maybe, I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, you guys have probably the best marriage I've ever seen in my entire life. Like, I always say that it's fake and they must hate each other when they're not in front of people, but I don't think that, because you guys do everything together. I mean, you go shopping, grocery store now. I mean, everybody, you're always holding each other's hands. Like, but growing up, you did everything together. You spoke at all of the big conferences. Mom spoke at all the big conferences. You built the Amway business. Mom built the Amway business together. Like, everything was together. How were you able to make that work? Because there's a lot of people that couldn't. Like, I couldn't. When I tried to do it, with Kennedy, my ex-wife. Like, how were you able to do that?
Boy, that's hard to answer that one. Mom was very shy when we started into the Amway business. Like, very shy.
Right.
She couldn't even talk to, if we had 5 people in our living room, she couldn't talk. She'd
Really?
just shake, And through the books and the audios and listening to speakers and everything, she was hungry enough. I said, look, we're going to be diamonds one day. We actually went farther than that, but we're going to be diamonds one day, and you're going to have to learn all this stuff.
Right.
And you're going to have to get really good at it. But she's always been more important to me than anything else. And we're best friends, and we always have been. And I had to learn, there was a time when we barked at each other a bit, and that would have been around 1985. Because I'd bark at her, and then she wouldn't say anything. Then I'd say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. And then we'd go on. But she started growing, and she got strong. So I'd bark at her, she'd bark back. So we butted heads for about a year around 1985. But, I remember where were we? We were at the Georgia Dome, and there's 80,000 people there. And I remember Valerie walked out to speak. And I thought, wow. Because if you can grow that far from you can't talk to 5 people in a living room and all you do is stand there and shake,
right,
to where you walk out to an audience of 80,000 people and you speak and they want to hear you. You actually have something to say. I don't know. So I guess the answer is I don't know. She just always meant more to me than all the rest of it.
Well, I definitely can attest to that, because I mean, in everything we do, it's mom and dad. It's not really, dad does his thing, mom does her thing. I mean, obviously there's different roles of support. Like, mom dealt with us a lot. You were gone more than she was because you had, you're on a board sometimes or did different things, but mom was mostly with you. I mean, it when you guys had the jet, it was always you guys, and it was just, you always did everything together, and it definitely was a good example. So, I don't know if I ever said thank you or if it means anything, but you've definitely set probably the best example of marriage I could ever even dream of. It's
thank you.
Maybe it's a fairy tale, but it's been unbelievable to watch you and mom do everything together. I mean, you literally built a massive empire together. I mean, this has been, it's been awesome. And mom, I sometimes wish she would be shy because she is pretty damn feisty still, but so she's grown a lot, but she beat my ass a lot growing up. So that was, she was definitely not shy then.
Yeah, you did get a few spankings.
I probably got spanked more than probably the most of population of Utah's kids combined.
Probably.
But, hey, look at me now. I feel like I'm doing better. I'm not perfect by any means, but obviously it worked, maybe. I don't know. But the last thing I want to ask you is, how do you define success? What does success mean to you?
Well, I've been, in business for 40-something years now, a lot of different things. And success to me is doing something that you love to do, you really enjoy, that you can both have an interest in, you can both do it together. If, like me and Mom, and that we can do it together, and you can make enough money that you don't have to worry about it. You can put enough money away that you don't have to worry about ever being paycheck to paycheck. And it's a bad thing for people to live paycheck to paycheck when the constant stress of everyday life is on them.
Right.
And they don't know how to get out of it. And so success to me is taking something that you are passionate about, that you love, and turning it into a thriving, huge, exciting business of some kind, whatever it is that you're doing. But I measure success a little bit more in freedom than I do in, having a lot of net worth and buildings sitting all over.
Right.
And not that one's bad or not, but I just, that's how I see it.
I mean, I think it's, freedom, happy. I mean, that's success. I mean, there's a lot of, and it's different in everything, right? I mean, to me, you have a very successful marriage. So that could be, someone's definition of success. They just want to have a successful marriage and live a good life and a happy life and, do their thing. Yeah. Some people are, very materialistic and think they need a bunch of things to feel successful. So, but Dad, thank you so much for being on this. It means a lot. Like I love you more than you could ever know. And you mean the world to me, and I don't know where I would be. Well, literally I wouldn't be here without you, but I don't know where I would be without you. And, you've shown me how to do more things that I can imagine in business and in life, and teaching me so much that, you've truly been like my mentor in everything. And, I'm excited to keep, our Haugen name, our family name going. It's a very different industry than what you were doing before. But like, it means a lot to me to keep this Haugen name going, because it was such a, amazing name growing up. A very, popular, famous name, back in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s. I mean, even in the tens of 2010 and whatever. But I've always had that, like, not really like a chip on my shoulder, but like a burning desire to want to keep something with the Haugen name and be the one that kind of took it to the next level. So thank you for giving me last name. And even though it's very hard to pronounce, but I just, can't thank you enough for everything you've ever done for me and just taught us so much. And I say us because, us kids, but taught me so much in life and business and relationships and in everything. And just, I love you to death. So thank you.
Well, I love you, and I'm so proud of you. Me and Mom are so proud of all of the kids, but you're really taking the bull by the horns and being creative and putting all the pieces together and making this grow. And I know that you got your brothers there that work for you, and they're in the game too. But I'm really proud of all that you're doing. I could have never imagined that you had come this far, and I think it's only the beginning of where you're headed. So I love you a lot. I'm very, very proud of you.
It means a lot. Thank you. Well, thanks for being on.